And I was going to ask you about your perceptions on Central Asia and where we could cooperate here. And I think your point about recruitment, there are literally thousands of recruits coming out of Russia into ISIS right now. But on top of that, there's the wider problem of this radicalization and the pace of it. It seems to me that there is this room for cooperation, but at the same time, there are questions about what Putin would seek from us, what could he offer. There's also the question in terms of associating ourselves with Putin's efforts, counterterrorism efforts, because I'm not sure what form they would take, given the way in which we try to conduct our counterterrorism operations with a great deal of, shall we say, care. And certainly, what's obviously most vexing to me is watching Syria, instead of hitting ISIS, he hit the Free Syrian Army, and instead of hitting the army, he hit the markets. His bombers hit, the hospitals, hit the schools. This aspect of this is what is so troublesome for us in the West, because it seems counterproductive in terms of the effort of actually going after Islamist terrorism. So walk us through how, Dr. Aaron, we could engage on that front.
Well, on Syria, I mentioned, yes, all those things you mentioned could be summarized under the heading of different divergent goals. The goal of Putin in Syria is to, A, to save the Assad regime, and I could say, we could discuss why he wants it. B, to present the West with a totally repugnant choice between Assad and ISIS, and C, have Russia as the dominant outside player in the Middle East. Clearly, neither of those is our goal. In Central Asia, on the other hand, I think the goals do coincide. Let me remind you, Mr. Chairman, last week, there was not just a terrorist act, there was street fighting in a city of Aktuba in Kazakhstan between government troops and terrorists. That's 400 kilometers from Russia's borders. That is, that's less than 250 miles. What Churchill was mentioned here, I think, by Jack Matlock, Central Asia is a soft underbelly of Russia. This is an enormous area, that there are 6 million guest workers, many of them illegal, in Russia, coming in and out from Central Asia. Russia is a major recruitment center for ISIS, an estimated 300 to 500 recruiters. Most of Central Asians have been recruited not in Kazakhstan or Tajikistan or Kyrgyzstan. They were recruited on construction sites in Moscow to join ISIS. There are all kinds of statistics. For example, Russia speakers from Russia and the former Soviet Union, primarily Central Asia, are the second largest language group in ISIS after Arabic speakers. We cannot help Putin inside the country, and we could discuss why he has this problem inside the country, radicalization of its own Muslims and the guest workers. But in Central Asia, I believe, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and to a certain extent Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan are very troubled states. If they fall, as I said, the danger to us is that they'll become havens for terrorists.
Let me just add a point, because Mr. Engel and I have traveled in Central Asia, and we've had many meetings and many explanations from local government officials about how Gulf state money floods into that region and acquires either radio stations, television stations, newspapers, increasingly how also imams come from another part of the world and change the indigenous Muslim faith or ideology to a new ideology. As they would say to us, these are not our customs. These are customs that are being imported here, but they're changing our culture. And it looks like what we see happening across Central Asia is also happening across southern Russia. And that then leads to this problem. And I would argue this is going to be the next big problem because of the rate at which this is happening. The last point I wanted to ask you, I'm almost out of time, is just some of the stuff that we hear on RT television or on Russian propaganda. The Zika virus was created by the United States. You know, you have a $450 million budget spreading this kind of nonsense across Latin America, Central Asia, Europe, around the world. Here, a lot of disinformation, 24 hours a day. There has to be a more effective way to move forward to counter this disinformation, get the facts out there, and item by item, knock this stuff down with, you know, knock this narrative down with the truth about what's going on, because obviously it is having an impact among the Russian-speaking population in Eastern Europe, certainly, but beyond that now. This is being translated in all these other languages, and it's just a constant big lie propaganda effort that has to be countered. Dr. Aaron, any response on that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have to put on my BBG governor hat. We have a good relationship with your committee. We're working together to make U.S. international broadcasting more effective. Let me tell you, though, that my own experience is that ultimately the most effective countermeasure to the Russian propaganda is not just the U.S. airwaves, but the empowering the local Russian-speaking population in former Soviet countries. I'm sorry, former Soviet Union.
Reporters and stringers.
Reporters, stringers, through non-government and government grants. One of the examples that I believe I gave testifying on the issue of the Russian propaganda in the Senate was Stop Fake, which is a very effective site in Kiev run by the students of the Department of Journalism of the Mogila Academy. This is ultimately the only way to counter the Russian propaganda, because it gives the people of those countries, and of course this could be spread. Similar efforts are occurring in the Baltics and the Central Asia.
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. Mr. Elliot Engel of New York.